Hey everyone. I'm actually going to walk you through today's lesson so that we can all be on the same page when I come back to class on Monday, okay? So at the very top of your paper that you picked up on your way in, there is a do now. Go ahead and look through pages 105 through 118, and just based on your memory of that section of the book and the very end of part 3, answer who these animals are and who they symbolize in the story. You have 5 minutes. Go ahead. All right, spend this last minute and a half checking in with your neighbor. See if you identified the same symbols. All right, we're going to go ahead and move on. So hopefully your answers look something like this. The hyena is a predator. And he symbolically represented the chef, the French chef from The Simpsons, who killed Pie's mom, who cut the leg off of the wounded sailor and used it to fish with, and whom Pie ended up killing. Orange Juice, the orangutan, is prey, and she represented Pie's mother. There was all of that information when we first met Orange Juice, that she was beloved at the zoo, that she had 2 little boy orangutans, which Pie's mom had 2 sons. So there was definitely a direct correlation there. She also ended up being killed by the hyena. If you remember, they had a battle, but the orangutan lost, the hyena won. That was symbolic of the chef attacking Pie's mom. The zebra, which was continuously all throughout the book described as beautiful, represented the wounded sailor who ended up on the lifeboat with the broken leg. Pie was just kind of in awe of this young man's beauty and his innocence and his struggle to survive. And he was eventually killed. Well, they cut off his leg, and that definitely led to his death sooner than maybe it would have. And lastly, the tiger, or Richard Parker. Richard Parker is a predator, for sure, a tiger, and he symbolically represents Pie, or the side of Pie that had to come out on the lifeboat in order to survive. The side of Pie that gave up being a vegetarian and had to start eating fish and turtles and people, etc. And the side of Pie who defended his mom by trying to fight off the chef, and the side of Pie who eventually did kill the French chef in order to survive. Okay, so hopefully that all lines up for you. And it brings us to the big question of the life of Pie. What do you think, which story was real? Go ahead and take a couple of minutes and discuss this with your neighbors. Okay, there's not a wrong answer here. It's really whatever you choose to believe. And even in that answer is one of the themes of this story, right? Weirdly, it takes more faith to believe in the story with the animals, right? It seems more bizarre, and we're much happier, and it seems easier to believe the story with the people, okay? That might say something about us as a people, that we're way more happy to believe that people can be so awful as to murder each other in order to survive and eat each other in order to survive. We're happier to accept that explanation than we are these animals. But, that's probably for another class to discuss the nature of humanity. But I think Pie created this story with the animals in order to help himself cope and survive. He said over and over again, all throughout part 1, that people tell themselves stories in order to survive. Animals who, he gave the examples of the dogs raising the lion cubs, remember, in part 1? And he says the lion cubs know that the dog is not its mom, but they tell themselves the story because if they accepted the fact that they didn't have a mom, it would be too hard of a truth to bear and they would end up dying, right? So we tell ourselves these stories in order to keep going. That's the message that Pie is giving by telling this story. And that's the message Jean Martel is giving, really, in writing the book Life of Pie. So I think the story with the people is real. I think that the entire point of the story with the animals was to create the theme of choosing to have faith is living the better story. And that's just what I think. But you can think whatever you want. And when I get back in class on Monday, we can talk about it more. Okay, so we haven't talked a ton about this, about Richard Parker's, about Richard Parker symbolizing Pie. This is just a little bit more of an explicit explanation. Richard Parker symbolizes Pi's most animalistic instincts. Out on the lifeboat, Pi had to perform many actions to stay alive. And in his normal life, he would have never done these things. Pi was like this sweet little religious boy who never wanted to harm anyone. Remember, he shouts out, "I just want to love God," right? And that's his one desire in life. And then he turns into this kind of ruthless killer who's going to do anything in order to survive. That is the symbol of Richard Parker. He kills his mother's murderer. Richard Parker is the version of himself that Pi has invented to make his story more palatable, both to himself and to his audience. The brutality of his mother's death and his own shocking act of revenge are too much for Pi to deal with. He finds it easier to imagine a tiger as the killer rather than himself in that role. Okay, so we're going to be coming back to that at the very end of today's lesson, but the bulk of today you're going to be working on analyzing a poem called The Tyger. It's written by William Blake back in 1794. William Blake was a British romantic poet, meaning he wrote a lot about nature and feelings and faith and God and how all of that connects together. Don't forget, I didn't make a typo here, so everybody calm down. He spelled tiger with a Y. The spelling has since transformed into the I. I don't know why. That rhymed. Okay, here we go. In this poem, the writer is looking at a tiger, okay? And you have to kind of take yourself back into the late 1700s. You couldn't like Google a picture of a tiger. There weren't printed picture books of tigers. You didn't have a lot of encounters with things that weren't a part of your daily life. All right. So if like a traveling zoo or menagerie, as they used to call them, would come into town, you would finally get an opportunity to see some of these animals that you had only ever heard about. So William Blake talks about his experience of seeing a tiger in person for the first time. Okay. And he starts to question, I don't know when the last time you saw a tiger was. They're real scary. They're super intense. They're massive. And they're beautiful in a way that makes you kind of be struck with awe at how beautiful they are, but also at how dangerous they are and kind of that balance between it. The poet is asking what kind of a person or God or what kind of a God could design the animal and how they could make such a fearsome creature. Okay. Again, this is the late 1700s. So it's kind of around the time of the poem we read at the end of Gilgamesh, Death Be Not Proud, in England, where basically everybody, culturally at least, believed in God. Most people even followed the religion of England, which was Christianity at the time. Okay, this is a picture of William Blake. He is a dapper gentleman. Here we go. Okay, on your sheet of paper that has the poem on it, I want you to look at these words on the screen, go find them in the poem, and highlight them. Quickly, faster. First is immortal. The second is thy, which simply means your. The third is symmetry, meaning it's the same on both sides. Thine means your. Seize is to grab. Sinews are the tendon parts of muscles that connect to bones, maybe, or other muscles. I don't really know. The tendons. Dread means scary or impressive. A furnace, in this case, we're talking about a furnace that was heated to like super, super high temperatures in order to melt metal for like metalworking and things like that, okay? An anvil is this thing right here. This is a heavy block of iron on which heated pieces of metal are made into a particular shape with a hammer. And then a clasp is the thing that metal workers would use to take things out of the fire. Make sure all of those are highlighted on your paper. So when you are reading through the poem, you can look back up on the screen to see what those words mean.